Hey everybody, my name is Andrew Davis and you are watching Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my sponsor, Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. Printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. From their instant quote calculator that lets you get as many quotes as you want for free to their 24-hour customer service support, Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed many successful Kickstarter campaigns, including my guest's very project. So obviously you've heard about them, and if you haven't, you're about to on this very show. And they offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK. And Mixum can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com, and right now they're running a promotion where listeners of my show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount on their first order. And I know and you know that every percentage that you get off, especially if you just reach your goal or $1,000 or even $10,000 off, makes a huge difference. So that is Mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to receive 5% discount on that very order. And so without further ado, I got comic creator Sam Quinton in the show. So welcome to the show, man.
It's good to be here, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. My head is all right because I know everybody wanted to know that. I know everybody wanted to know that, and if you don't know why I'm mentioning that, well, you could just pretend that you're in on the joke. So having said that, you currently do have a Kickstarter going on.
I do,
47 Furious Tales, issue 3. Apparently, I don't know what number I have to get you to, so that's going to be fun.
Well,
and you also have the artist edition.
You did promise to get past 20,000, so we're gonna keep drinking with you until we get there, I guess.
No matter how many bottles it takes.
There you go. But you're buying, so it's all good.
Even if we fail, we'll have a good time failing. You know, we'll fail up, right?
There is no failure. We only succeed.
And also the artist edition of Volume 1 is part of this Kickstarter. So before we get too far ahead and before this show completely dissolves upon itself, what is the basic premise of this comic for those who are unaware of it and haven't backed issues 1 and 2, haven't heard of it? Because it is familiar territory to some people. Obviously, the story might sound familiar, but it's also might be brand new territory at the same time.
Right. So 47 Furious Tales is a 12-issue limited comic series that tells the story of the 47 Ronin from Japanese history. But we tell this using anthropomorphic animal characters. So this is a comic book series. It's kind of in the vein of things you would see in like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Usagi Yojimbo, with anthropomorphic animals acting the roles of our principal characters. And so we take the story from history and we're telling these events as they occur. Now, most of the time when you see the story of the 47 Ronin, either in a movie or in a stage production, they tend to act like, okay, Asano was killed, and then within a couple of days the samurai rose up and struck down his adversary. But historically, that was actually a period of almost 2 years. So there's a lot that actually happened in there that we don't normally see covered too much. So issue 1 was successfully funded on Kickstarter on the second try, and we got that out. It basically introduced Asano Naganori, the Lord of Eiko, and several of his key samurai who were part of this story. Issue 2 gave a little bit more depth to what was going on and introduced an underlying plot from our main antagonist. And then issue 3, the one that we're bringing now to Kickstarter, is really a lot about action and some resolution on Kira's first attempt to act against Asano through this bandit gang, the Grey Wolves. This particular issue is very action heavy, So much like the overall layout of the story we have planned across 12 issues, this is one of those parts that you have intense, heavy, decisive action that lends itself to the greater story. So when I wrote this overall narrative, when I structured the outline and figured out what was going to be in each book, I tried to follow a storytelling motif after the pattern that you see in Akira Kurosawa movies. Who of course did a lot of great samurai epics, not just samurai epics, but just probably the greatest samurai epics that have ever been devoted to film. And a lot of the strength in his movies, in that particular vein, is in not using violence gratuitously, making sure it's quick and decisive and actually has a purpose for forwarding the story. And so I tried to make sure that we were doing that in this series as well. And so this is one of those big fights that come up and forces our antagonists into a new method of attack. And we get to enjoy furious samurai action as a result.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack, and we're going to dive into a bunch of it. But I am curious where this idea came from, because obviously my first foray into anthropomorphic was Mouse.
Right.
And obviously that's a very, very intense graphic novel. You know, I read it in high school. I read it before high school. I did an entire report on it. And I love that. And it also changes the way you view something. It makes it so that you sort of pick up history a little bit differently, because you're visually, you know, viewing something. Also, Cat Shit One is another one that does that really, really well. And so where did the idea for you to take what is a well-known story of the 47 Ronin, it's been done in anime, it's been done in manga, obviously stage plays, movies, there's been adaptations of it, and go and throw animals into it, for lack of a better word, because it is really brilliant and it's smart, because it's giving history in a different way, and it's also, I guess, revitalizing it and repackaging it so that people can say, oh man, this is different, but it's also historic, and it's very cool, and it's super smart, and I appreciate it, because I would never think to do it this way. It wouldn't even come across my mind. But then when you see it, you're like, oh man, this is great. And this is brilliant.
The origin of this was kind of a strange collision, really. I had always been familiar with the story of the 47 since a very young age. When I was in my teens and early 20s, I was a competitive martial artist. I fought competitively. And as part of my training and my studies, I read a lot of classics. So I read like the Book of Five Rings, The Art of War, every bit that I could get on the philosophy and teachings of the martial art techniques. And part of that, of course, brought me into the actual literature concerning the 47. So this was a story that was known to me for a very long time. And then in late 2017, early 2018, when shortly after founding Sunopa Publishing, I was putting together ideas for getting into comics, because comics were always something I wanted to do. And I remember I was taking a break and cruising around the internet, and I happened to see a little GIF of two squirrels fighting with lightsabers, and that was just fun. And then immediately thereafter, I stumbled upon an image of a squirrel wearing full samurai armor, and just something in my brain clicked, and I said, I could tell the story of the 47 Ronin and use these anthropomorphic animal squirrels as our samurai, and actually take and expand it to actually represent the actual time frame, and kind of fill in some of the holes that history doesn't have data on. So it makes a nice coherent story, and kind of tells a little bit more about the sacrifices and the things that these samurai endured before they were able to extract their revenge. And the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. And I took that idea and a handful of others that I want to develop, and I brought it to everyone in the Facebook group that we have for the artists and writers who contribute for Sunopa Publishing's material. And Alexia Veldhausen, who's an artist I had worked with on a few RPG projects up at that point, immediately leapt at doing 47 Furious Tales, because she is a huge fan of all things samurai movies, samurai comics. martial arts, you name it, she's all over it. And so we had a lot in common on that. We had both a real strong familiarity with the narrative as a whole, and the development of it proceeded very swiftly. In the concept, the overall outline for the series was done very swiftly, and then the actual writing began literally all in the span of a month. So we put that together. We then started having her work on character designs and getting those together, and then we got too excited and rushed into a first attempt at Kickstarter. I was still fairly new to Kickstarter. I think we had maybe 3 successful Kickstarter campaigns under my belt at that time.
And let's talk about, just to give a little context, we're talking 2017, 2018, right?
Right. Yeah.
The first issue, sort of before the boom, I would say, of Kickstarter in the last 2-3 years, really.
Yeah, I mean, Kickstarter was still pretty strong then, but it's definitely seen an uptick because now you're seeing much higher numbers and people attending to comics in Kickstarter than you were at the time. I mean, there were a few really large campaigns that happened prior to that, but you didn't have people really producing consistent numbers like you do now. I mean, you didn't have a Carmen America at the time. And while Brian Pulido was producing, Lady Death, I mean, he was in, like he still is, in a very rarefied strata of someone who routinely produces 6-figure Kickstarters. And since then, he's actually moved to the position where he's producing 6-figure Kickstarters 6 times a year. So, I mean, it's definitely grown a lot in the last, 3.5, 4 years.
And the reason why I bring this up is that obviously we're going to get into that Kickstarter and all the Kickstarter stuff, because obviously that's what people want to know, and everybody wants to know how to run a successful Kickstarter.
Right.
And I think it's safe to say, well, Kickstarter, there's strategies you can utilize, but there's also trial by fire.
Right. And you can learn a lot by doing, but honestly, you need to learn more by doing your research. Research is absolutely critical. Before anyone launches a Kickstarter campaign, there's a book by Madeline Holly Rawson on creating and running your Kickstarter and how to promote it. And so I recommend that not just for anyone who hasn't done crowdfunding before, but even people who have. I think I had 8 or 9 Kickstarter campaigns under my belt before I discovered and picked that book up. And there's really a lot in there that's good to remind yourself of. And I actually, to this day, I try to make sure I read through it again.
There's also another book, and there's a series of books. And I know some people, if we're going to really get into what Kickstarter is, which is a funnel. I love funnelytics. I think funnels are the greatest thing, and that's what Kickstarter is. And once you understand what a Kickstarter is, it changes the way you can deconstruct it and utilize it and reposition it. And Russell Brunson, who is the founder of ClickFunnels, has 3 books. And he talks about building your funnel, talk about filling your funnel up with traffic and keywords, and understanding your rewards and your exits, and then also driving traffic to your funnel. And so I recommend, maybe you don't need the first 2 if you're running a Kickstarter, but the driving of a traffic and using things like the Dream 100 and a variety of other tactics is going to be some of the most useful things. And obviously I've been reading all 3 of those books, and they are beyond helpful too. And obviously I haven't read the book you recommended yet, and I'm probably going to pick that up because I'm launching something soon. But it's the idea that it's very important, to sort of go in with a strategy.
I thought I actually had it here next to me, but it's probably on my bookshelf. But yeah, Madeline Holly Rawson. I'll try and make sure that you have a link to that book tonight, so that you can link it in. I am a little different with how I view Kickstarter. I tend to think of it more as a community event in a lot of ways, kind of like a barn raising mentality. That could be because I'm older than a lot of people who use Kickstarter. But for me, it is very much about bringing community together.
This is so interesting because, and you tell me, because I've never run a Kickstarter, and so I could be talking completely out of my backside here. But Kickstarter, my understanding of Kickstarter's intention was that I have a really cool idea. I don't have the money to do it. I'm willing to give everybody a reward, or if I'm producing the money, everybody gets to see this and gets digitally downloaded, for example, or a comic book. Everybody gets the issue,
Right.
and that, cool, we basically crowdfunded it and nobody's making money. And now what I'm starting to see is that people are essentially building page rates into their Kickstarters and treating it like a business, or people have deals with indie comic distributors or mainstream ones for that matter. And those mainstream people say, look, we don't want to pay for you a page rate, and we don't want to buy your product, or we don't want to license your product. So why don't you fund on Kickstarter? You take care of your artist, and then we'll handle the mainstream getting into stores position. And so I'm curious how you view all this, because it's very much gone through that. Because when, obviously, I've backed a lot more products in the last 22 months, but I backed maybe 2, 3 before that was on the table, and it's evolved in the last 4 years in a very interesting way. And I'm curious how you've seen it, because I've only seen it from the consumer side. I have not seen it from a business side, or I've seen it from a business side. What I mean is I haven't seen it from, I guess, doing it myself. And so I'm curious how you feel being in this space.
I think that the larger publishers approaching Kickstarter and Indiegogo creators is primarily seen in comics and board games, realistically. I do a lot of crowdfunding on role-playing game books, and that does not really see that happen very often at all, with the notable exception of the Critical Role staff and their animated series that they did that then got picked up by, I believe, Amazon. But with comics, you'll see people like the Niobe creator Larry Higgins, who is now going to be seeing his book being distributed through Antarctic Press, which is something that you really have to appreciate the significance of. Carmen America being picked up, and I forget who's carrying them at the moment. I should have that memorized by now, but they're also being carried out by larger distribution. And you see IDW, who is now publicly saying that they're going to be pivoting, and in 2022 hope to be the place for indie comic creators. And a lot of what you're seeing particularly are places where maybe people don't have licenses that they used to have before, and they need new and original content. And the thing is that original content creators are doing very well by creating on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Now, from me myself, my funding level tends to be just at the level where we get the product created, get everyone on the staff, i.e. my artists and my letterers, paid, get my printing paid, my shipping done, and then I actually make my money subsequent to that, selling to stores and to other people directly. But as you cross up into higher levels of funding, when you get past that $10,000 mark, when you start seeing people, funding in the $20,000 range, you start seeing people who, as creators, are making sustainable revenue through the Kickstarter and the subsequent sales. Now, this is more so true if you are yourself the artist who's doing the illustration for the book, because then you not only have the control directly over what it looks like, not only do you have the control about how quickly you can put it out, but you also aren't paying $5,000 to $8,000 for an artist to create, and centralizing.
Or if you have an equity partnership, is the other thing too. If you have an equity
partnership. But the reality of it is that not a lot of people are proceeding on that model. Now, I have done that on books that I'm creating in RPGs, and with one future comic project. And of course, there's I can't go into the details due to the non-disclosure agreement we have, but there's a vested interest in the IP for Alexia Veldhausen for 47 Furious Tales as well. So she continues to see revenue on merchandising, for example, is something I guess I can disclose.
The reason why I bring this up is obviously equity versus page rates. It's a very complicated discussion that happens, and I'm not putting you on the spot but it's just another way how to structure something. there's plenty of times it's the whole thing. I'm obviously really into stocks. I am buying equity when I buy a stock in a company. It's a way to raise capital. It's a way to get something in return. And it's ultra complicated, and it's very interesting to see what's happening in crowdfunding, where obviously, and also I'm seeing a lot of publishing deals with a lot of publishers like Behemoth and Second Sight Publishing, where those Kickstarters that they're picking up only did 6,000-7,000. And what I'm starting to see is that, and I'm curious your thought, because again, I might be wrong, but I think a lot of these publishers sort of know there's good stuff out there, but they don't know what's going to hit exactly.
Well, Second Sight has done very well, and that's a good name to put out there, especially when you start looking at names like Madeline Holly Rawson. But don't count out Mad Cave. Mad Cave actually got access to one of the best comic writers on the indie scene, and that's Brian Hawkins. And while a lot of people might not know him as a household name yet, that's just a matter of time. Brian Hawkins is an absolutely amazing comic book writer. I can't say enough good things about him. His book Cornrows, issue 2 didn't fund, which was a crying shame, because book one will really grab you. And in fact, if you haven't read it, I recommend reaching out to Brian and getting a copy, because it's a stunning book. But you've got folks like Mike Shea, for example, with his Miskatonic High. You've got, again, Madeline, who comes up a lot because I'm a terrific Madeline Holly Rawson fan. You've got Larry Patrick Higgins and his work with Niobe. And these are really good examples of folks who are funding in that, 10, 20, 30,000, and Madeline oftentimes above that range, who are really in demand. Sam Johnson in the UK with Geek Girl is another gentleman. Is another gentleman that you're going to see more people looking to bring in, especially with how much the comic industry is in transition right now and looking for talent. And that there's a lot of factors that play with that. I mean, we could go on for hours and hours and hours about how much does the corporate machinations play into that. How much does the condition of
so I'll explain my logic why I think this, and maybe, and we might, this could be referenced, and in 5 years it could be crazy. So I'm a huge wrestling fan, and I just saw what WWE did with NXT for the last 5 years. And obviously I interviewed a lot of indie wrestlers, and they brought in an entire class with NXT. They brought everybody up on the indies, bring in a class of 16 to 20 wrestlers. Then they get rid of 10 of them, and then they cut that 10 down to 5, and then they cut that 5 down to 3. They keep the 3, now the rest are gone, but they brought in another class, and they brought in another class, they brought in another class. And now WWE has changed the way they're doing business. But the reason why I bring all this up is, for a while they did this for 8 or 9 classes, circling about 120 to 140 wrestlers. And they brought in, and they're keeping a bunch of people now. And the idea is that, I think, and that's where I'm getting this idea from. Now, I understand it's slightly different in comics, but it's this idea that it's, okay, that mentality in building your bullpen, because you don't know what's going to hit, how it's going to hit. And it's, right. I don't think it's a talent issue. I just think that entertainment is whacked out right now, where there's so much good stuff out there, but certain things aren't making it. Every season on Netflix, every 3 months, we get a great show that gets canceled because it just had no interest. And then we get, and Netflix is just taking those shots. And I get that it's a $20 billion budget that Netflix has. But if we look at it, the way I see it is that if we really get down to the core of it, all we're doing is we're talking about entertainment at the core, and it's all the same stuff, just with different money and a slight different position. Now, I love Larry. Obviously, I back Larry Higgins' project. Niobe is an amazing comic.
Same here. It's really good, yeah.
And Sam Johnson was one of my earliest interviews. And
Yep.
When he was a nobody, he was one of my earliest interviews, and he's been on a bunch of times, and I thoroughly enjoy him. I think he might have been my first live interview, or my second live interview that I've ever done, what feels like 10 years ago. So I don't think it's talent. That's my logic. But we are so far away from talking about samurais. This is really such a great tangent, though. And then this is not going to get us to the 20K here.
Well, we're gonna leverage you on that one. It might take a kidney, but we'll get to that. We'll get there.
It'll take a kidney and me robbing a bank. Clearly.
No. Just donate an organ. You'll get us there.
so getting right back into 47 Furious Tales before I get hated by the entire comic community. I'm gonna need you guys on November 1st. I'm gonna need everybody on November 1st. I'm gonna be talking about this on Thursday. But anyhow, I'm a huge anime fan, obviously, and so what was this like? Because this is an American comic, but it's got Japanese ties to it. And what was that like, even building that out? Because we are talking about a very traditional Japanese story.
The key issue was to make sure that the research was done as thoroughly as I could with the time that was allowed. So I had to go back and reread some of the literary sources because some of them I hadn't read in 30 years. Went through a couple of the historical documents I could dig up. Spent a lot of time on going over the images from the shrine where the 47 are interred, pulling reference images of statuary that had been done commemorating the 47. We used a lot of that for reference for things like the armor and for reference to basically what we were transitioning to in the anthropomorphic versions. And just kind of getting a real appreciation and a very laser focused attention to just how we had to make sure that we did the best that we could to tell the story in an accurate way, where the history was known. In spots where there's pieces of it missing, we use that with creative license to put material in, hence where we get like the Gray Wolf Bandits representing some of the stress that was going on culturally with crime on the rise at the time. There were some socioeconomic issues going on, obviously.
And also, obviously, American comics are not the same as manga, and obviously there's some serious famous, samurai manga. Vagabond is one of the ones that comes up. Rurouni Kenshin. We could throw some Berserk in there as well. And obviously, what was that like? Because that stuff's out there, and that stuff is phenomenal. And this is definitely more comic oriented, and it has a similar vibe to some degree, but it also goes a very different direction, and keeping it in the traditional American value in a lot of ways. Because
we did nod towards the Japanese influences in a few different ways. And the first, artistically, was Alexia. When she went to inking these were all done with actual physical brushes. So I had these pulled off the wall again so we could show this off. This is one of the original pages that's available on the Kickstarter. And you can see, maybe not with my camera, but when you're looking at these, the detail on this with the brush strokes is truly just remarkable. Every application on this has purpose. Every stroke, every dot is important. And then when you look at some of the effect pieces that were done for some pages, there were some where the inking technique was literally just to let the ink spray across the page. And you see that a lot with cuts with swords, so that it kind of has her, when you watch her doing it, she actually will follow through in the same direction. And the effect of it is that ink tends to splatter out much like blood would from the wound. And it really does make for, I think, a really nice touch into the pages. And the overall application of it was influenced both by the traditional brushstroke art for calligraphy and other brush ink techniques common in Japan in art in this period, and also a little bit of the influence for the backgrounds in particular for the old woodblock prints that Japanese art was producing in that time frame in the Edo period. There's so much that Alexei was able to squeeze together to form this unique vision for this book artistically, with so many Japanese influences. And then for a manga specific influence, we took the size of the book itself and put it a little bit closer to the traditional manga size. Not quite the traditional manga size. There's a few printing reasons for that as well. But we brought it into a 6x9 digest size. So when you look at the book, it actually looks much more like you're holding a Japanese manga than a more traditional comic. It's broader and shorter instead of taller and more narrow. But when you dive into the pages, the focus is on making it beautiful with a lot of natural elements in particular, which is something that you also see in particularly a lot of samurai themed manga. I'll get the word out right eventually. So there was definitely a lot of Japanese influences on that. That's something that you'll never be able to deny, not just as the story straight out of Japanese history, but a lot of the artistic influence as well.
Yeah, and I think it's very important with this tale to do that, and obviously with this comic to pay attention to it. And also, I think that at this stage in the game on Kickstarters, the fact that you are slightly changing the size of a book to give it also that, because it changes the reading experience. And certain books, you know, a reading experience may or may not matter. But with this book, it does, because obviously you want to give that tie, and it changes how it's done visually. And somebody might not think too much about it, just might on the surface think that it's done because it might be cheaper, or you know, you just wanted to do it that way. But
It's actually not. It's actually not cheaper. It actually isn't. Is the funny part. Uh, the choices on this book, even the quality of the paper was important. Like this book, the cover on issues 1 and 2 is 130 pound cardstock with a satin soft touch finish. The book feels amazing in the hand. It's nice, heavily constructed, 80-pound interior pages. There are some comics that are produced where their cover is not that heavy, you know. So it's definitely built to last.
So let's talk about that, because you know, I'm sure you've gotten Kickstarters that you're like, I just spent $30 for this cover and it's not up to $30 par position. And then maybe it's an exaggeration, but you
I've
get what
actually only had that happen once. I typically pledge for most Kickstarters at a digital tier, because that's actually more efficient for the creator. They actually get more money into the campaign. They spend less on fulfillment. Digital actually usually don't really have much, if any, cost at all for fulfillment. But for print production, there are some people who have shown consistently that they have particular attention to that. So Madeline Holly Rawson, okay, who is your name, you're gonna hear that a lot out of my mouth, that's for sure. I'm a big fan. Her print quality I find absolutely no faults with. Mike Shea, Sam Johnson, Larry Higgins, Max DeVille. These are people who are paying attention not just in the art, they're paying attention in the story. They're paying attention to taking good care of their art team so that their artists are happy to, not just willing, but happy to come back to work on the project so they can revisit characters that they actually know how to draw, know how to put into action. And then also with the paper qualities that they're using, Max DeVille is a really good example of this recently, with Mary Machine Gun, and the books that he had some foil work done on. And of course, Larry Patrick Higgins with some of his coming out too. And that kind of attention is part of the artistic expression, certainly, but it's, I think, more profound as a reader experience, because it really places that value at the consumer level, at the person who's reading, enjoying, and cherishing the book.
No. I mean, I appreciate when somebody goes and gets a nice gloss finish on a book and actually chooses a gloss finish or a little bit more of a shine on a book versus, you know, just giving me a straight, you know, dull cover, or, you know, obviously. And look, I'm not a print guy, or I'm not a comic, you know, cover like expert in printing. But I know the difference between when something is quality and when something isn't. I'm not going to say I know 130 pound versus 80, but I can feel a card stock cover is very different
Right.
than a traditional floppy,
Hmm.
and yeah, especially when I'm paying those extra monies on a variant, I expect a certain type of quality. And I think it's very important that, with Kickstarter, because Kickstarter is also more of an experience
Hmm.
right now versus than when you go to a store. Because I've seen it, and I'm sure you have, or maybe you have, but I have from my experience, where a book goes to a store and it's not the same quality in the store as it is on the Kickstarter. And I might have paid $5 more on the Kickstarter than I would in a store, but I'm also helping the creator get their project funded.
I think that depends on the creator in particular. Um, the for example, the books that I ship to stores have the same come out of the same press runs that are used for the Kickstarter campaign. Um, the thing about that is that then you, as a creator, need to be mindful to make sure that you're bringing that same price value to your Kickstarter campaign. So variant covers, good example of this, the 47 Furious Tale issue 3 campaign right now, we have one variant cover by Paul Walcott, and people can add that to their pledge for just $5. So adding yeah, I know you saw your eyebrows go up. It's a variant that you just add on for $5. Yeah, exactly. And this is something that on participating stores, the stores who have been carrying 47, when we ship to them in bulk, they're able to put that book on the shelf at $5. So it just makes sense to me to go ahead and make that allotment on the campaign too. The books themselves actually price out at about $5. The big part of the actual Kickstarter tiers is actually in the shipping, and then in some of the value in the other additional pieces that are in there. For example, the digital PDF copies for the issues, the digital copies for the artist edition, print copies for the art edition,
We're going to talk about this. We're going to
things like
talk about
that.
this. I promise. So, so,
Mhm.
so let's talk about value, because I'm sure you heard the statement where you either have to be the cheapest, the most expensive, or the most valuable in anything you do. And so obviously when you're granting a variant, if I back and I'm interested in getting issue 3 and then I'm interested in getting the variant, I could just add it on for $5.
Mhm.
That's a big value factor. And also providing that value and providing all that. So how do you figure out what is the correct value and saying, hey, I want the people who are backing this Kickstarter to realize they're getting the best deal here,
Okay.
and figuring out how to find that balance, because it is tricky. And
Right.
I'm sure I don't think it's an easy thing to determine in a Kickstarter, because, as I stated, I don't have a problem spending more money on a Kickstarter than I should for a project if I know I'm getting certain values with stretch goals,
Right.
or if an extra 3 pages is being added to it, or the book then gets a glow in the dark thing like Travis Gibb did on Cthulhu
Mhm.
Invades Oz, and
Right.
because that's adding value to my position.
So determining price for any Kickstarter is for any Kickstarter tier or item on a Kickstarter campaign is a little bit of a complex issue. You need to know what you're funding with the Kickstarter, where that money is going to distribute to, i.e., art, lettering, print, shipping, the whole nine. You have to be able to account for the fees from Kickstarter and the service they use to transact. And from that, you can derive what your final goal needs to be. Um, this particular Kickstarter, for example, has a goal of $7,000. Now, $7,000 would not in itself pay for everything to get this book created and all of it shipped. I obviously have a lot of money that's already in this project, which was generated from sales from previous books. And that's how we have a $7,000 campaign instead of a $10,000 campaign. But the key thing on this for me is to give the best value and the best price. And by best value, I mean the highest quality product we can deliver. And then the best price is what can we do realistically to put it in people's hands as close to price point as if they were buying it on the shelf. Okay. And so that cuts into it a bit because of the shipping calculation, right? And that's not something you can really get around. For example, my local postal service will not let me ship by media mail. So everything I ship has to be first class, or for bigger orders, I use UPS for the bulk carrier rates. This puts my shipping cost just on my postage in that $6, $7, $8 range for just a couple of books. So that has to be factored into those tiers, which is how you end up with, hey, we get print copy and we get a bunch of digital stuff and it's $20. Well, you've got $20 minus the Kickstarter fees leaves you with 18, and then you've got $8 in postage, probably $2 in postage materials, shipping materials, and then the rest of it basically is your items left that you're actually shipping. And you that's how I get that value calculation down, to try and put it in people's hands so that they aren't having to pay exorbitant amounts for books to be done. Now it does mean that my goals have to be higher because my margins are smaller, and that makes it much more intense to try and raise the number of backers to get to that level. Now we have a lot going for us on 47 Furious Tales now. We have a lot of supporting stores who are waiting to order the book after it's produced. So that's going to produce revenue subsequent to that. That'll help obviously on book 4, just like it did help us to bring the cost down on book 3. And we have the advantage of, we have, for example, our first retailer backer today, which was the Gotham Underground, who have been supporting 47 since we launched. And that kind of support has the effect of showing value to the customers who are picking it up in the store, because they pick up the book and it's no different than picking up something from Marvel or DC or Image, because it's in that same price point range. And then especially for a premium book, for the material quality that we're using. So trying to get that value and quality, it is an effort. It's a lot of work. So for example, this is I believe this is my 5th or 6th appearance since we launched Friday night. And that's basically the pace I expect to be handling throughout the entirety of this campaign, to get as many people introduced to the campaign and continue to bring repeat backers in. The necessity of it is to have as big an audience as you can who appreciate what you're doing and who recognize the value that you're giving, which for new backers, takes a leap of faith. They have to see that you've been successful. They have to see that you're producing, and they have to know that you're going to deliver. And fortunately, I have 14 campaigns behind me with fulfillments, so that goes a long way towards letting people know that they are going to get their stuff.
And even going further into this, because I also think this adds value, it's the idea that the product is the same for, as you stated, the retailers and for the consumer. So if, my retailer and my local comic shop, or, obviously I buy online from comic shops, aren't carrying this, but I back it on the Kickstarter, obviously I'm getting the same thing as if I was getting it from a local comic shop.
Right.
And I think that that's very important because it treats it now, I feel like it's more serious. And I think it's a common mistake with Kickstarters and people is that, and a lot of people who don't have a distributor, if you have, print to order, I think it's called, right?
Well, I don't use print on demand for comics. I actually am no longer using it for any future RPG products as well, because print on demand typically doesn't give you the ability to select things like paper quality. All of these books are printed offset. They're printed here in the United States. They're not printed in China and shipped. They're printed here. I actually use withSam to print this for a lot of different reasons. One, of course, for quality. Price, it keeps jobs here in the United States. I don't have to wait for 3 months to get my books, and a whole litany of things. Don't get me started. withSam's been very, very good to me. But that whole thing about getting the same quality level is absolutely important. And the other thing too about 47 that's kind of interesting, we don't reprint covers for floppies. So the first cover for issue 1, we only printed 500 copies of that book. That floppy won't be reprinted with that cover. Now we used an inked version of it, the non-colored version for the cover for the artist edition, issue 1. But the actual colored version, this cover right here, as you can see, these are the same image.
So that's the third one, which is similar, and then this is the artist edition, I believe.
That's the artist edition for the issue 1 first cover, right? Which is just the actual inked version of that page. The reason we do that is to help preserve the value for our Kickstarter backers and the people who are supporting the book at this time. If we go into, say, a distribution deal with Penguin in 5 years or something like that, we'll use different covers. And so people who are, picking up books now, knowing that, hey, there were only 500 of this cover, there were only 3,000 of this cover made, there were only 1,500 of this cover made. The value of that as a collectible is more preserved through that. And I know you know a lot more about speculating on comics than I do, but it's important to me that the people who are supporting us now are looked after. And that's a very small thing to do. I can get another cover done for $1,000 and then print 4,000 or 5,000 copies and ship them to stores around the United States. I need to add more stores. Like I said, we're just into 23 as of this week, or 24, something like that. So if your local comic shop doesn't carry 47 Furious Tales, talk to them, because we will ship that to them directly. We don't have a distribution well, that's not true. We have distribution through Comics Mainstream, which handles distribution to stores like marijuana dispensaries, bookstores, and then what else are we in? We're in a game store out in Oregon, is where they're distributing right now. And they'll be putting into some local comic shops in Oregon soon as well that will be carried in too. But the comic shops that we are shipping to directly, I ship out of this home office, which is why we have all these packing materials behind me. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's whether it's Gotham Underground, whether it's East Side Mags, whether it's Dewey's, which is attached to the Kubert School, the Collective in Altamonte Springs, the Hive down in Texas, the Box down in Louisiana. I just drew a blank. Heroes Realm in Lexington, Kentucky, and the list goes on and on and on. Getting those books to those stores, it's like this. They order through me, I pack them, I ship them the next business day. As soon as they pay that invoice, it's in the box. So it makes things a lot easier on those local comic shops, because they can move that product faster. They can see a quicker return on their money, and they really don't have to worry about getting a shipment and they said, hey, we wanted 5 of these, what's this? Because if something is out of stock, I can tell them right then, hey, we can't ship that because that's out of stock. So we can do this for you if you like, or we can ship without it. And that kind of flexibility, that kind of agility is doing wonders for me, really.
Yeah, no. I think direct sales are the future for a lot of companies. Obviously I bring up Zenoscope. They do direct live sales to their customers, and they've been doing it now since the start of COVID, and every con is shut down, and it's killing it. And they're going to New York Comic Con, and then later this month they're going to do a bunch of live sales. And I think it's very much the future. And so I actually am curious though, because obviously you mentioned the artist edition. What is the artist edition, and why do you want to do an artist edition? Because it's very different than anything else that's out there.
Right. We had a lot of people who have been inquiring as to the original art pages from Alexia. So we make some of those available during the Kickstarter campaign, obviously, but those pages are usually $250, $300, sometimes as much as $400 a page. And the idea with the artist edition is to create a volume where people can see that art and appreciate what it looked like at that inked level, at those raw pages before they were digitally colored. And so we have all those scanned files, and we're assembling issues 1, 2, and 3 for the first volume, along with the actual illustrations that were done when we were working on character concepts. In fact, if you like, I'll make your sponsor very happy and your audience happy here, I hope, and I'll show you guys something a little special. So this you should have in just a moment. This is withSam, a preview screen for the print copy of the artist edition. So this is the cover image that we're using for artist edition volume 1. And with the withSam interface, you can come in here and take a look. So this is not the final font. We're still working with that. But we take and we start this and we go through and show all of the unlettered, raw, inked pages that we have from Alexi on this. So this is the first and second cover of issue 1. And then the very first page that you see when you open 47 Furious Tales. And this book is actually 92 pages of content between that. I'm going to thumb through.
And so even talk a little bit about that, because obviously what's so interesting about this is that issue 3 is coming out. Right. And obviously this encompasses issue 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
But it's not a catch-up. It's sort of a catch-up, but it's not a catch-up because there's no real lettering, and you're just seeing how it originally was done.
This
very
is
much
literally just so that you can appreciate the art as it was created by hand.
It's kind of like what they've done, DC Comics has done with Watchmen, and they've done it with Court of the Owls, where you're getting that line work and you're seeing how it is. Right. I forget what book it is, but Marvel released a book, and the experience of it in color and the experience of it in black and white. It might have been a Jim Lee book, I think. And it's like a famous issue of the X-Men, or famous like 4 or 5 issues of the X-Men. And it's a whole different reading experience.
Right.
And it's very interesting. And so I just think it's very cool. It's also very much more a collector's item. It's also more of what I view as a shelf, book versus, it's the type of thing where issue 3 is a floppy, I think it's safe to say.
Right. Issue 3 is a floppy at 24 pages. And this is actually perfect bound, 92 pages in all. And this will also be available at the retail locations who are supporting us as well. Now, the simple fact is, with only 23, 24 retailers supporting us, not, oh yeah, Phil, I'll get 47 Furious Tales will be available at New York Comic Con issues 1 and 2. Not 3 though. 3 won't be available anywhere until after our fulfillment's done. But the artist edition is going to be available after fulfillment for those supporting stores, and then we will take and make those available on subsequent campaigns until that print run runs out. Now that as a collection we will reprint eventually once we run out of the first press run. But the thing about it is we want people to be able to have it. And yeah, it is definitely a collectible item, but we don't want people to have to pay premium collectible prices for it. So with shipping factored in, adding that on to your order is only $20. So that basically makes it, its retail price is probably going to be about $14.95 on the shelf, depending on where you're at, because some stores will price them a little differently. But considering the amount that's spent on the shipping of it, to be able to add it on for $20, or there's a tier for it where it's both copies of issue 3, the digital rewards, and then that print copy of it for $40. I mean, it's a hell of a bargain on Kickstarter right now. And I don't think a lot of people have fully caught on to that yet, but I'm hoping. I'm hoping that let's
go into that a little bit, because obviously this is a premium product. Obviously, you're getting the regular issue. you're getting this, and obviously it adds weight to it. I think it's
Yes.
safe to say, oh man, I'm about to drop some breaking news, guys. But when you add weight into any package, it costs more to ship,
Yes.
and you know, obviously shipping isn't cheap, and I
Mhm.
think you factor shipping in, and
Yes, shipping's included in these tiers for everyone within the United States and the territories.
so I think that's something that a lot of people haven't figured out because maybe they've never seen an artist edition before, or they've never seen
Mhm.
anything, or they because that's what I'm curious about is that this is a brand new product. I've never seen an artist edition. I've seen trade paperbacks, I've seen catch ups
Mhm.
and perfectly bound things, but I've never actually seen an artist edition on indie. Now, granted, you know I've been doing a lot more indie content creators in the last 22 months, so I could have missed something. But I think that's something that's being missed, and I think it's a real issue because I think this is really smart. And I think it's also the idea of saying, look, this is something if you're a fan of this, and
Mhm.
also from an investing standpoint, you know, if this does become a motion picture or becomes, into Penguin, books or goes into another distributor or there you get an action figure and it's that character and then there's a chase variant of that action figure, well, that's going to affect this. And this might be a sleeper in a lot of ways.
Mhm. And there there are other folks who have put together books that are like this. You don't see them very often, and I think the reason for that is multifaceted. One, I have the advantage of knowing that the series is literally 12 issues, period. So we can do 4 volumes of the artist edition, one every 3 issues, and keep a very steady cadence. Two, we have the advantage of the method by which these books are constructed. The inking being done by hand is not exactly very common anymore. So having that touch to it is a little unique, and being able to bring that as its own art form is a pretty big deal. And then the other thing too is that we are printing in bulk, and what that helps us do is to reduce our cost per item so that we can bring it to people at that price point. So instead of having to say, well, we can do it, but it's going to cost you $50. No, we can do it and bring it to you for 20, including your shipping. And that's a remarkable thing to be able to see take shape. Now, does that mean that we don't make as much money on the book? Yeah, exactly. It means we don't make as much money on the book, but it has the intended effect. It makes it more accessible to a wider audience so that we can really give
It,
more
it,
people
it,
the full
it's
experience.
also, I don't know how you feel about this, but when I back a lot of Kickstarters, and I think you've backed a lot more than I have, I think I backed 30 or 31 at this point. And so I'm very much a baby, but I'm a super backer currently on Kickstarter, so go figure that out. I, I think it's a premature title, but I'll digress right there. I get priced out around $30 or $40, usually on a campaign. Where especially, my perfect pledge for me is 2025 is where I'm golden.
Mhm.
And if you were to price this book at 50, I might think it's cool. I might be interested, but I'm priced out. And I
Right.
think that's something that a lot of people don't, maybe people do know and say, look, I can't do it any cheaper, which I understand,
Mhm.
because obviously I have expenses. I buy and sell a lot of comics. So I know that there's certain deals I can't take. I'm in the middle of a negotiation and I know what value I can't go below,
Right.
and obviously when I'm going to be reaching new sponsors at some point, there's certain valuations I can't go below. And so what is that like to have that advantage of saying, hey, I can print in bulk and that I actually don't have to price anybody out, and I'm hitting
It's a
that
huge
sweet spot.
advantage. It's a huge advantage. Now, it does result in people telling me that I price my stuff too low. And there are some arguments that might make that correct, honestly, because by pricing low, it's kind of an inverse relationship. The lower my tier price are, the higher my goal has to be, because my margin is smaller, and that margin is where the money for my art team is, right? Um, Now, if I priced it out at $25, $30 or something like that, yeah, we could have for a floppy, we could have a lower price point. I know a lot of campaigns, including campaigns I support, they'll have a digital tier, and then they'll have a print tier, and then they'll have a tier up above that where they combine the two. I didn't do that. We have our digital tier, and then we add the print copy, and so we add value with each of these tiers as we go up. So you were talking about, you know, about 25 or so. Our $25 tier is a catch-up tier where people get a print copy of issue 1, a print copy of issue 2, a print copy of issue 3, the PDFs of all those issues, and a digital copy of the artist edition for $25. And that includes their shipping in the United States. And the only reason I can do that is because I'm printing in bulk. And that's a hell of an advantage to have, because that's being able to put 3 books in people's hands, 72 pages a comic, for a price point that was more common for a 30-page book or a 32-page book.
And I'm the first person to say this, where obviously I'm a collector of comics, and I hate when I'm buying a $25 tier and there's not a digital copy included. Now, I understand maybe not a digital copy of the artist edition. I completely get that.
That's in there. Every tier $10 and up, except for the retailer tiers, has digital copy of the artist edition and the other. Yeah, I mean, it's in there.
So no. What I was saying is that I know it's in there. I want to make sure everybody knows it's in there. What I was saying is that when I'm backing on other people's Kickstarters and I pledge at a $25 tier and that's just the physical and you're not including the digital, it irks me, because why do you want to charge me another $5 for a digital copy when I'm already spending and I'm already tiered up? And it bothers me because it's not like I'm going to, it doesn't cost you anything to include a digital copy of it. And if I'm spending $25 or $50 on a variant, I'm not cracking it open. And what that tells me is you don't want me to read your book. You want people to read your book, I think.
I think there's a couple of I do. I want everyone to read my book, really. Which is one of the reasons we've worked so much hand in glove with other creators to get them to put 47 in people's hands. Max DeVille and myself. Max's backers got a digital copy of 47 Furious Tales issue 1. Larry Patrick Higgins, his Niobe backers, they're getting a digital copy of 47 Furious Tales issue 1. And this is going to other creators as well, who we're co-promoting with, who we're taking and bringing more indie comics to folks, so they have that value, so they have that experience, they have a chance to step into new genres that they might not have explored otherwise, and see new and cool things that are coming out. But there are some logical reasons to charge more for the digital. They are valuable, but I think that for my particular model, how I do things, it makes sense just to build them up and keep going. And fulfillment of that is actually easier for me than for some people, because I utilize, for digital fulfillment, I utilize Drive-Thru Comics and Drive-Thru RPG. And what that does is it enables me to put that in there and trigger distribution so that the backers are getting it readily accessible on that site. And not only can they download it from there, but it stays in their library there as well. So they can download it and have it on their phone. They can download it, have it on their tablet or their desktop.
Isn't that one of the biggest flaws in Kickstarter, that there is no central file when you get all these digital comics? And I understand that creators on Kickstarter might not want to give Kickstarter that power.
Well, here's the thing. I have talked to folks at Kickstarter. I've sent them, they ask for feedback from all of us at some point in time or another. And one of the things I've repeatedly asked about is maybe the ability for us to distribute copies through some type of file share within their native environment, something that could then hold a library for the backers credited to them. Now, yeah, it would require a little bit more database management, but the truth of the matter is that the file capacity of that would not be tremendously huge. It would make fulfillment much easier, and Kickstarter's making a ton of money, and a few $1,000s more for cloud service every year would not hurt them. And I think it would be far, far, far more convenient. But I can also understand why they wouldn't want to do that, because there, among other things, there are some data security questions about that. Whereas if we're using someone like Drive-Thru Comics, who already has their security protocols in place, time tested, so that you can upload documents, and when they're making them available, there's no malicious code embedded in them. That's reassuring, and I like being able to do that for backers, not just for the fact that they have that, but also it's easy on fulfillment. I mean, I can fulfill 200-300 people. I shouldn't say that. My most has ever been 208. I think it was 208. Anyway, I can fulfill that in an hour digitally, easily, with time to spare. Taking my time and dotting the I's and crossing the T's. It's easy. As opposed to physical fulfillment with the packing, the labeling, the shipping, the mailing, all that kind of stuff. That's obviously much more intensive, but the digital fulfillment, like that. And I try to recommend to other first-time creators for comics and for role-playing games that they make use of that, because it is a very valuable resource, and it's incredibly handy, not just for yourself, but for your backers, because it automatically produces, like I said, in that account library for them. If they ever have a hard drive fail or something, they can always go back and get their books. And it's a lot easier for them to do that than it is to chase down creators 5 or 6 years later.
I agree. And also, things just get lost in Dropbox,
Sure.
emails. Things just get lost. Like, it's not great. I have the 30 things I backed, the digital stuff. It's a mess. And I'm lucky that I save it into a file and I'm good to go for a while. And also, a bunch of these people I interviewed, so if I ever need something, they're relatively accessible. But I'm the anomaly here, But it's very interesting and all this stuff. And I'm sure we're going to dive into some more stuff, but I do want to talk about rewards. And we spoke about a bunch of this.
Sure.
But obviously, this is the third cover.
Right, by Alexia Veldhausen. Yep.
And then this is just an image that's awesome.
This is actually one of the pages from issue 3. It's not colored in this particular set. And actually, after we've posted this, Alexia has decided she wants to go back and redo some of the elements of this now that she's had time to look at it, after she's had it done. So this will get redone a little bit. But what we're doing with this campaign is we're going to show these pages. We're going to show them from the inked level. And then later on in the campaign, you'll start seeing the colored versions of them. And the idea here is to, one, accommodate the production schedule, but two, also to make sure that we're sharing the experience with the Kickstarter backers of really watching the book evolve, so that they can see that and appreciate it, and share in the experience. Because for one, I love seeing these pages come together. I love seeing them when they go from pencils to inks to getting the color touches on them, seeing how they take shape as the lettering is applied. Those individual elements coming together to make a completed pages, I think that's a really beautiful thing.
And then obviously we sort of spoke about this, which is the artist edition.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously this one is the variant for $5, guys, $5. And
by
so,
Paul Walcott, yep. Paul does great work.
And so that's a really cool one. And if you're going to spec, it's not that bad of a spec. If you're just picking up, one tier for $5 more, you can go this way.
We will probably only print about 1,000 of those. And the reason being, well, I mean, if we have like 1,000 people back it, we'll print about 2,000 of them. But we probably won't print more than 1,000 over our Kickstarter order. So it's going to be a limited quantity, definitely.
And then obviously there's this, which is, I think, another page.
Right. This came out of issue 2. This is one of the later pages. This was one of those dynamic, bloody scenes. And with issue 3 being so packed full of action, we wanted to show some of the dynamism of the title line itself. And this is particularly telling because this is our Grey Wolf Bandit chief, who is really up to no good in issue 3, and the Samurai of Asano have to come down and handle it, and it's he's pretty important in this section of the story.
And this is just one of my favorite things on the entire Kickstarter, this image.
Right. And this is also from issue 2. We have Lord Asano Naganori in the front, Yasube and Yahei, the fox samurai, behind them. And then Chikara is the squirrel directly behind them. And then some of the other samurai we have scattered in the back there. Now, there is a little bit of a spoiler in here. Alexia Veldhausen decided that she wanted to put a little bit of an Easter egg in this image. And so one of these samurai is not like the other. And I'll let you guys figure that out over the course of time. If you have to know, pledge to the campaign, send me a message, and I will spoil that little Easter egg for you.
I figured it out. It took like 10 seconds. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
I think I figured it out, but I'm not going to ruin the game here. And then obviously those are the images, but then there's original art tiers. Obviously, if you're a store and you want it, you can pledge and you could pick up a variety of different things. And one of the cool things you do is that obviously you could pick up 30. I think there's 60. I think there's a 90, issue tier. There's some artist editions. I'm sure that if somebody wanted to order 200, you wouldn't say no for whatever reason.
Yeah. We've shipped as many as 300 to a store before, so that's not a problem.
I'm sure that if somebody has an odd number, you can figure it out for them. But also what I understand is that they can pick up a certain number of each issues, from my understanding, given that, certain stores might just want issues, 10 of each issue, or they might know that their backers or their customers, not their backers, already have, for the most part, issues 1 and 2, and they need more issues 3, and obviously that's something that's out there, and then obviously all that stuff, and that's really good customer service in a lot of ways.
Like our first retailer back today, and they've been, like I said, it's Gotham Underground. They've been backing us each step of the way. They've been tremendously supportive, and we know what they need. We know what they need. That's not a problem. They came out and they backed the campaign anyway. We'll have to we'll get up with them later to add the additional content they need. But primarily they need issue 3, and then a few copies of issue 1 and issue 2 sprinkled on top, because they've actually sold 3 orders of comics so far, sold out of 3 orders of shipments for 47 Furious Tales so far. So the book is moving, the book is selling. It's selling very well for shop owners. Even we shipped to the box when they were first opening, and then tried to turn around and ship another shipment to them. The Collective, the same way. The Collective actually, I think, has maybe now regained the title of the store to sell the most titles. I think. I'd have to go back and check. If not, they're only behind Third Eye Comics. And that's Pete. So if you're at New York Comic Con, swing by booth 1866 and pick up 47 Furious Tales issue 1 and issue 2.
I don't know any of these people, so I'm really not good. So I'm just going to say I'm sorry that I don't know any of you people.
Pete is a wonderful artist. He's a wonderful, let me clarify, he's a wonderful underground artist, which is basically to kind of put into the scope his theme of his artwork. Now, the funny part is if you follow me on Facebook, you're going to see my daughter opening stuff from Pete Vasquez, because I commission Pete for things I give to my child, because his work brings her incredible amounts of joy. You just see her face just light up, and it's really wonderful. I love being able to send Pete work for it. And he's big enough that he's at New York Comic Con. Not everyone can do that. Despite what people think, it's hard to get into New York Comic Con. And he's got a big space. So definitely come down, pick up that. You can also pick up works by Max DeVille at that table. You can pick up works by Larry Patrick Higgins at that table. He's going to be representing is the wrong word. He's going to be carrying a lot of titles that were made available through Kickstarter, so that a lot of new readers are going to become introduced to those. thanks to Pete.
Yeah, getting into New York Comic Con is hard. I mean, I've been trying to get in as a panelist, and it's crazy.
Pete's
And
been doing it for years. And so when I say Pete Vasquez is a big underground artist, I mean Pete is a big underground artist. You gotta take him seriously. He does fantastic work. I'm actually buying my daughter a larger size scrapbook so that she can start keeping her collection of art from Pete Vasquez in it. And I know it sounds weird, but she's got probably a little over a dozen pieces right now. One of them is going into a frame. I commissioned Pete to actually draw and ink my daughter, an illustration of her with her favorite bunny. So that's going up on her wall. And yeah, Pete's the best. He's fantastic.
and obviously there's a lot of stuff going on, and so obviously we spoke about your goal being high and why,
Right.
um, and obviously people should back on that front. And then also though, one of the things that you've done that I think is fantastic is that you have a very interesting first stretch goal. And
Yes.
and so I actually like it where you're doing a private Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when we reach, or you reach 8,000, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so what is that like? Because obviously stretch goals matter, but also keeping them relatively cheap. And well, every dollar you spend on a stretch goal comes out. And there's been
Right.
plenty of Kickstarters that have definitely done their stretch goals wrong.
Well, here's the thing: when you have stretch goals factored into your calculations, regardless of whether they're inexpensive or pricey, it affects the margins. It's going to affect your final goal. But the fun part about this is they need to really bring value for the backer. So in this one, what we're going to do is actually Pete Vasquez is hosting this for us on November 5th, the day after my birthday. And we're going to be taking questions and answering, myself and Alexia, questions from our backers. So that's literally only going to be open to people who supported the Kickstarter campaign, which we're trying to make sure that we stress to everybody. Because there's some folks who have asked if they could come in and check that out for their channels and whatnot. I'm like, the only people who see this are the people who back the campaign. That's it. And Pete's going to make that accessible. He's a Twitch streamer on top of everything else, and he has an affiliate, so he's keeping his stuff on Twitch. So it's really very kind of him to facilitate that for us. I'm really looking forward to it.
And then even going further off of that, obviously, you are also doing a, print at 10K, and then it
Yes.
becomes double sided at 11. And
Mhm.
then obviously at 16, the book goes from being a soft cover, the artist edition, to a hardcover, which is
Right.
also really nice because obviously that goal benefits everybody who has an artist edition book.
Right. And that's the point for stretch goals, I think, is to bring more value to the backer without negatively impacting your costs. Because I think as a Kickstarter creator, one thing you really have to watch out for with stretch goals is damaging your cash position and hurting your ability to fulfill. A stretch goal should never be constructed if it's going to interfere with your ability to distribute your backer rewards, if it's going to cause a problem with the shipping, if it's going to require additional packaging. Those are warning signs that you probably need to rethink that. I think digital are really ideal, as particularly for comic Kickstarters. And then the next things you see are adding additional content, additional pages, if it's possible. In 47, it really isn't because of the way the story is structured. Um, and then adding art prints that don't really negatively impact the shipping weight. That art print, for example, that goes out to everybody who has backed at a print tier. So unless you're all digital, you'll get that art print once we are at that stretch goal. Um, and like you said, at the next one up at 11,000, it becomes two-sided, where we'll have the raw black and white inked version of Warren Brown's piece on one side, and on the other side will be the colored version, colored by Phil Leon. And that's, I think, that's good for mitigating weight, obviously, but it's also a good way to give value without without impeding the ability to fulfill, which should be a real high priority for all of us who are creating Kickstarters.
Yeah, and obviously prints are not that expensive, all things considering, to produce a
Right.
print and then also weight. It's not that bad, and it's so important. I like art prints the most out of stretch goals. I like art prints, and I like magnets, and I like metal cards. Those are my three favorite things because
The thing I find that I've done in the past, the art prints have worked very well for me. And stretch goals are always one of those things. Well, like, really, was it something to do? Should we have done it a little differently? We've added, for example, in role-playing game books, we've added additional art content. And that was always tough because it does increase your costs rather quickly. But with this campaign, it fits it to a T.
yeah, and there's a lot of stuff coming in, hopefully, and if we do what I said we did, and I don't remember what I said, so this is really bad. So
You said you were going to make sure I had $20,000 funded. You were personally guaranteeing it, so I'm holding you accountable for $20,000 worth of backing.
And we're going to exceed it. We're going to exceed it. It's going to happen. We're going all the way.
If we get to 13, I expect you to be pledging 7,000, and thank you very much for your support.
Absolutely. Me and my Bitcoin.
There you go.
I'll just cash out my Bitcoin and we'll be off to the races. There we go.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Your contribution is definitely appreciated.
Now we only need to convince everybody else, and then you will never have to fund ever again.
No, I mean, we'll keep having the fun because, like I said, the revenue for this really does go into the production. I mean, people could analyze this easily by looking at the page count, and using the current price points for artists, especially working on color. And matter of fact, if you're really careful, you could probably figure out how much money I've already put into this project ahead of time. And knowing that I print through Mixam, knowing about how many I'm printing, it would be really easy to deduce. You could also calculate the weight, figure out the shipping, and voila, there you go. That's the thing about math. Math is pretty easy to work through if you know all the factors that you're looking at.
I mean, I know how much Mixam is. I don't know anything else, and I just know that there's a lot of money that's put in to projects. There's a reason why I am not doing Kickstarters and I am not funding a comic. It is expensive to do it.
Comics are expensive, yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, I have economic parameters in my business and in my personal life that I am funding certain things first and foremost. And also I'm in between jobs right now, and I don't want to become poor, and I would like to,
Well, like I said, that's I know that the spot you're in. That's why your contribution is so greatly appreciated. Your sacrifice will not be in vain.
No, it's going to be in vain completely, and it's going to be bad, and it's going to be horrific, and here we go.
So you cash out half a Bitcoin,
It's half my Bitcoin and a kidney.
No, just one half of one Bitcoin. You'll be fine. Or one kidney. Yeah, one kidney will do it.
I mean, you have to for a reason, right? Like,
yeah.
We don't have two hearts. I mean, I'm just saying.
Bilateral symmetry, man. Bilateral symmetry.
I'm just saying. Who knows? Maybe I'll become faster, as a runner after I lose one kidney. Less weight on me.
Well, you'll have to run. You'll have to run to the restroom faster. That's for sure. So yeah.
That is true, and my speed will increase. I'll beat Usain Bolt every time.
Yep.
But in all seriousness, and obviously you've done a bunch of RPG stuff as well. Recommend go checking that out. I am curious though, because obviously I want to back out of this project, and I'm gonna give you a chance to self-promote. Don't worry. But where do you think COVID is going, and where do you think comics are going, and even conventions and all that stuff? Because obviously COVID has messed up a lot of stuff in comics. And you seem to be doing well, but obviously we could all be doing better. And where do you think it's going with New York Comic Con? Obviously, everybody's carrying your stuff out there. Furious
Right.
Tales, 47 Furious Tales, obviously is going to be at New York Comic Con and a bunch of booths apparently.
Mhm.
But where do you foresee all this going?
Well, I don't claim to be psychic. I've done 2 conventions since the pandemic hit. I was masked up for both. We made a lot of use of hand sanitizer. We kept our social distancing. We were very, very careful with our interactions to protect ourselves and others in the comic community. I hope that people are keeping that same mindset at New York Comic Con. There are people who are going to be there who I like, Pete Vasquez being one of them, that comes immediately to mind. And I want them all to be safe, happy, and successful. As far as what COVID has done, I think on one hand, it has spurred on the market for more entertainment. You see this in the productions that Netflix is trying to push forward. You see this in the surge in indie comics. Now, the surge in indie comics, that there's a lot of stuff that contributed to that. It's kind of a perfect storm. But there are a lot of indie comic creators who saw their campaigns jump up rather sharply. And it happened in large part because of their own efforts and their own work. But it kind of crystallized into being when you see more and more people saying, hey, I want good comics. And if your local store has been closed down because of the pandemic, if they're not open, if they're not operating, or if you can't get the books that you were reading before because maybe they're still on hiatus, then getting new and exciting books like Mary Machine Gun, Human Hunters, Neo Tokyo, Niobe, Geek Girl, Boston Metaphysical Society, Miskatonic High, and of course 47 Furious Tales is a real appealing option. Um, and being able to supply that means that we get to make more stuff, and making more stuff gets people more excited about what's new. And so if you're willing to work and you can really put your all into your projects and you can deliver them, then you see this growth in your patterns. For example, we're at, let me see, I think we're at 78 backers right now, right? $2,888 pledged of our $3,000 goal. We have only been live since late Friday night, and we're at 41% of our goal already. Now, that's a much higher point than we were even at issue 2, where we had, instead of 1 variant cover, we had 2 variant covers. Our price points were a little different. Shipping was lower at the time. And so we're definitely seeing a benefit as more and more people are coming out saying, "Oh, right, 47's out now." Fast forward to next year when our release pace continues to increase, and we expect to get 3 issues out next year for 47. Not to mention our other titles coming out, and that kind of intersection of people wanting that entertainment, wanting something that they can get a hold of and enjoy, I think has benefited those indie comic creators who are creating, who are producing their stuff and getting it in people's hands. Because that's one of the big things about comics. It is primarily a tangible physical medium. You can enjoy digital comics, and I do enjoy digital comics, but I think that for a large number of people out there, getting that physical copy of it is a huge part of their enjoyment of the medium. And doing that and fulfilling your promises to your backers is rewarded with people wanting more work from you. It's like the old saying go, the reward for a job well done is more work. So strap in, hike your sleeves up and get to work. That's what I think COVID's done to indie comics. I think those people who were producing and who were working on producing and who were doing so in good faith are seeing the rewards of that. Even people who'd been, at really top tier performance levels before, Brian Polito, even Brian's numbers continue to grow. I mean, he's doing, when you look at his campaigns and they cross 300,000, you're like, yes. And now you're seeing them cross $400,000. And that is a huge audience to satisfy. And he does it consistently through hard work, dedication to his audience, and that is something that people are really appreciating right now. And that's my take on COVID and indie comics. COVID and indie RPGs. COVID's been a real prick. We lost a lot of really talented RPG creators in the last 18 months due to COVID deaths. We lost some amazing talent in the indie RPG scene, and it's painful. It's painful. We've lost some really great indie comic creators too, but the indie RPG scene, I mean, we saw some people who were in the bright beginnings of what should have been brilliant careers, just cut down, and it was tragic. It was really tragic. So, for that, from the bottom of my heart, COVID can go fuck itself. Pardon my language, but it's I've lost in the last since COVID hit the United States in February of last year. I've lost 4 of my neighbors to COVID. And 2 very dear friends who live in various parts of Kentucky. 6 people who I knew personally, and my neighbors who I used to see, every day. And COVID took them. And I keep that in mind a lot, especially when people want to know, what do you think about COVID? Well, COVID can kiss my ass. Sorry to be profane about it. It's just, it's one of those things where COVID was good for indie comics and bad for all of us at the same time.
I know the feeling.
It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. We get more people buying our stuff, but there were some really great comic artists who died, and there were a lot of really great TTRPG creators who passed. So it's been hard.
Yeah, I know the feeling in which that. I know a few people who COVID has taken away from us. So
Yeah.
obviously, I think a lot of people do, and it's a very crazy situation, and it's not good. And it's a wake up call in a lot of ways to people, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed with that. And
So, yeah, I mean, go to cons, but be safe about it. You protect yourself and protect your community, protect your friends and family. Have fun, be responsible. It's like when you go out drinking, don't drive afterwards. When you go to cons, wear a mask, wear a funny mask, put a logo on it or a funny saying, put lipstick smooshes on it or what have you. Have fun with it, but protect yourself and protect others.
And so on that note, though, I do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself. So where can people find you? Where can people check you out on Kickstarter? Obviously, what RPGs you got.
Don't forget OnlyFans. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No OnlyFans for me. So let's start with just the social media stuff. You can find me at LL Sinopa on Twitter. It's Sinopa Publishing on Instagram and Sinopa Publishing on Facebook. And then, of course, I'm under WS Quinton on Kickstarter. We also do have a Sinopa Publishing page, but that's primarily for our RPG stuff. 47 Furious Tales is live and funding now. And yes, we do need your help to get our full funding goal reached. So I hope that you'll come out and enjoy the story of the 47 Ronin told in a new, unique way with beautiful illustrations by Alexia Veldhausen. And then beyond that, you can find our role-playing game materials and our digital editions of 47 Furious Tales Issue 1 and Issue 2 on Drive-Thru Comics and DriveThruRPG.com. Our Amazon store is probably coming next year. I hope to have it open by the end of this year, but I just haven't had the time to finish building it all up. So we will push it to 2022.
Yeah, you got a lot of shit going on, man. You got a lot of shit going on.
At least 2 new comic series next year, maybe 3 if we get the funding for it, plus the RPG titles that are coming out next year. So we're going to be incredibly busy.
You're going to be putting me to shame in my next 5 to 6 months because I may have 1 or 2 coming. And
go to DriveThruRPG. Check out Sinopa Publishing and realize that everything that's on there was released since June of 2017.
Check
it out sometime. I think you'll be surprised.
you're putting us all to shame, and we're just gonna quietly all walk away into the corner and
I
pretend.
just work with a lot of great people, is what the truth of it is. I work with a lot of great people. Not being able to draw makes that easy. Work with a lot of really great people, and they have a great habit of making me look better than I deserve.
That a lot of people do that for me too, in which that I have in the last 8 years I've been playing above my pay grade for the majority
Mhm.
of it, and sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes people just want to help other people out, and
Mhm.
it's amazing. But and I've been saying it. You watch my show, you know what I'm about to say. You have to support indie. Supporting indie, what that means, first and foremost, is that you need to back people's Kickstarters, whether that is a comic, whether that's an RPG, whether that's a podcast, whether that's somebody's action figure. So be it. You need to back people's Kickstarters, because we are not Marvel, we are not DC, we are not Image, we do not have big bank accounts, and a lot of all the money that's raised
Right.
goes into the book, and a lot of times it's not enough to get the book. It gets the book 80%, maybe 90%, maybe even 50% across the finish line, and creators sometimes
Mhm.
take hits on it. But it does help to get the book funded. And
Right.
what that means is you could back a digital tier, you could back a physical tier, you could pick the most expensive tier, or anything in between. And you need to be doing that. But also, you need to be sharing out when you back it. You need to be tweeting out about it, and you need to be putting it on Facebook, because friends, while I'm sure you mention a lot of stuff on Facebook, I do too. When other people mention my stuff, it goes much further than when you know I mention it, and
Yeah.
so that's super super important to do that. And also, Facebook's algorithms, as we all learned yesterday, we all learned a very good lesson yesterday, everybody. Okay, I swear to God, I made one mistake and I hit the red button and not the green button. I would just like to publicly apologize for everybody. I'm sorry that I broke the internet yesterday for 6 hours. I will
Uh,
not take responsibility for the whistleblower, though.
I was working my day job. It didn't affect me. I do want to take a moment too and just recognize that when we say support the book, it does impact real people. So a lot of the money from this campaign is paid. I mean, a lot of the money for this campaign is paid to the artist, to Alexia. Um, I've actually already paid a substantial amount on that, but then most of it here is going to Alexia and to our letterer. I already paid Paul. Paul's already paid. Um, and what that means is that this Kickstarter campaign is actually paying eventually her rent, her groceries, keeping her alive. This is her profession,
I would even go a step further, and this is my sponsor. When you're going and because I mean, you're going to be printing with Mixum for this third issue, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So also what people don't understand, and I'm not an economist, I didn't go to school for economics, but somebody at Mixum has a job.
Yeah.
And so when
And
you're
the print shops. Yeah.
and so all of a sudden, that's keeping that afloat. And even if it's not going necessarily to paying, that person's salary, but it's keeping Mixum afloat, well, congratulations. That's another printing option for you to have. And that's
Mhm.
another, competitor in the marketplace. And great. And that means that a business that's, in the United States or has a division in the United States, that then, those people eat, those people go to Starbucks, and then it becomes a big, cycle. So it's
Yeah.
not just. I would take it a step even further beyond your artists, where there's somebody at Mixum who's getting directly.
All of these. Yep. All of these were printed in the United States.
And
All of
so I
them.
think that's some very important to talk about. And what this Kickstarter isn't just supporting artists; it's supporting somebody at Mixum. There are comic shops that obviously are making money off of these books, and that's another thing too, where somebody might come in, and then that's another sale for that comic
Right.
shop. And all this stuff starts adding up. And then you might say, oh, it's only a few dollars. Well, a few dollars here, a few dollars there, a few dollars here. It makes a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, a comic shop that carries 20 of these, an extra $100 in sales just from 20 books. That's a huge deal for a lot of small shops. Um, and even for the bigger shops, if they've got a wall for indie books and they sell 20 copies of 47, and maybe that helps make them more inclined to bring other indies onto their indie shelf. And I think that when you can produce the books and make sure that they're making a real difference on your price points, that's a big thing. The basic end of this economic line is the last person who gets paid is me, the writer and the publisher. I'm literally the last person who gets paid. Um, and for example, with this campaign, if we get to like $20,000, I will probably buy a new pair of shoes because my shoes are 5 years old. And that will probably be what I do. But that's where the buck stops. The important part is getting it out there and getting things made, and I'll eventually make money on the retail end, selling it to other retailers outside of the Kickstarter crowd, and then also in convention appearances. So we'll make real differences in people's lives um, with these projects, and we pay our people very well.
And also, just to reiterate, because also, and I think you'll agree with me, is that I don't want anybody to go into debt to back this project.
Right.
You know,
so I think that's reflected in the tiers we've got. You can get 47 Furious Tales at a very, very, very wallet friendly price point.
and look, if you're in a situation where every dollar matters, I'm going to say something that's going to sound a little harsh. You should probably get off Kickstarter for a little while. And if money's that tight, you have a bigger issue. But if you want to support, you could support non-economically. Sharing things out. Sharing the Kickstarter out on Facebook, sharing it to Facebook groups is just as valuable. Even if you say, "Hey, I can only afford a $10 tier." Or a $15 tier or a $20 tier, sharing out on Facebook is worth just as much as any higher tier up.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you can't, if you're in a position of financial hardship and you can't afford a $5 tier on that, catch up with me after the Kickstarter's done. After I'm done and say, hey, I want to read this, but I can't afford to. We'll point you towards drive through, and we'll schedule a sale or something and get you a copy for $1 or whatnot. Because it's very important that people are able to read this book and enjoy it. Excuse me, I have to sneeze.
It's okay. It's okay. We're waiting. We're all in anticipation.
Sorry. Trying not to.
And I mean, it's happened on this show, and I'll say this, and I'm not going to say who it was with because I don't think that the guy and the girl want me to embarrass them. But what wound up happening is that, I shared it out, and then they saw an interview, and that person got 5 backers live because their Kickstarter wasn't appearing. And I didn't make any money. It was just that somebody shared an interview. Like, oh, man, this is great. How did this not appear in my, positioning? So obviously that's something that's super important. But again, obviously backing indie matters. Also for those who are interested, I'm an indie content creator. I have a bunch of stuff going on. My sponsor covers a bunch of stuff, and they're making about 66% of season 3 happening. I got a project launching November 1st. I think, people, if they're smart, they can figure out, what my project is. And, obviously I'm going to be announcing more and more and more. It's going to be really exciting what's going on with that. But I have also Buy Me a Coffee. And so if you are inclined, all that goes right back into this project and also helps to make sure that, this stays funded. All the money's going back into either new equipment, certain, help in social media, maybe a light ring, or even just keeping reserve funds for the day where something is an emergency where I can't get funding. Well, we're going to keep this going until I get out of a bad situation. So if you're so inclined, everybody, and you're watching this, it's in the links up above, and it's greatly appreciated. But more importantly, I just want to share on this. Share it out because I want people to listen to this, and I want people to say, "Oh man, it's a really interesting interview," and a lot of stuff is spoken about. So obviously, after this, tomorrow I'm going to wake up, grab some Starbucks, find a kidney donor and figure out what to do with all that. And after I ship out some comics, and possibly then I got to figure out how to get you up to 20 Gs. So that's the plan. I expect everybody who's watching this to contribute, so I can save myself and I can make my own piece of art. And otherwise, I am gonna go to the liquor store and
let's get to 90 backers tonight, or 90 backers to get to 80 backers tonight. That's what we should do. Let's get to 80 backers tonight. So 2 more tonight. Take it at a nice leisurely pace. Get us to 80, and then work on getting to 3,500 by Friday is basically how we have this paced out. 3,500 puts us at the 50% mark at the end of the first week, which is a really strong indicator. And we've still got more than 60 people who have saved the campaign that haven't pledged yet. And I think I've got 17 appearances scheduled for the next 3 weeks. So it's going to be quite a lot.
Yeah. You got a lot going on. So on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Okay. For everyone who's watching this, thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for supporting indie comics, indie content creators. I create 47 Furious Tales, a number of other comics that are coming, and RPGs. If you like the medium, if you want to step your toe into the indie comic pool and check out what's going on there, I invite you to check out works by myself, works by people like Travis Gibb, Larry Patrick Higgins, Tyler Carpenter, Max DeVille, Sam Johnson, Mike Shea, and of course Madeline Holly Rawson, just to name a few. Fantastic independent comic creators who are creating wonderful, wonderful stories. And let's not forget anything that's written by the man Brian Hawkins, because he is absolutely incredible. So it's definitely great to get new stories told by really passionate people. And I hope that 47 Furious Tales can be one that you'll enjoy for years to come.
Yeah, I think that's the ending pitch, and I believe that is a wrap.
All right.